Keith, welcome. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to speak to you today and go through a little bit of, what's going on in the ecosystem with regards to investments and entrepreneurship in the United States. And maybe you can give some context of what's happening in other markets. But let's get into it and have some fun. I hope our audience is also enjoying having Keith here with us, sharing some of his insights, expertise, and knowledge, since he's had such a great and impressive career. So Keith, welcome.
Pleasure to be with y'all.
Thank you so much. So there's a lot of opportunities to invest capital nowadays in the ecosystem. And I'm sure your team talks with a lot of founders and see lots of interesting opportunities. What makes founders and startups seeking capital amongst other thousands raising capital worth investing in? And in other words, how do you determine if a founder who comes to you is extraordinary and ready and you want to invest to take their company to the next level?
Well, it obviously varies by round. At Founders Fund, we invest both in venture capital, traditional venture capital, which I would denominate as the first institutional round from seed, Series A, Series B. We also have a growth fund that invests tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into companies that are clearly working and scaling. And the criteria, we apply is clearly different from a keynote deck and two people in the proverbial garage to a business that's doing $100 million plus of ARR. In what I focus on most of the time is people starting a company from scratch and try to get involved with the company as an investor, mentor, consigliere, board member as early as possible. So typically I'm looking at a company that hasn't launched even. So obviously when you're investing that early, about the only thing you can look at is the caliber of the entrepreneurs and the team. To some extent you can critique or analyze or get excited about a specific idea, but that's all you have. You don't often have a product. You certainly don't have metrics or KPIs. So fundamentally it's betting on the team. I would say as a fund, almost throughout any phase of the company, we're still trying to assess the team and the caliber of the CEO and founders and the DNA of the team surrounding the founding core execs. But fundamentally, there are other things. There's metrics and businesses and payback cycles and things like that we do apply and have some discipline around. But what I do is solely try to gauge the caliber of the founder.
Okay. And I'm sure that now that you're talking to founders through the internet versus in person, how has that changed the process for you guys?
It's extremely difficult. It's a really astute point. It's extremely difficult, truthfully. I have found that assessing founders that I don't already have some relationship with, some connection to, through Zoom is virtually impossible. I made probably, let's call it a core of COVID, 2020, like lockdown year, probably only 2 new investments into teams that I did not already have some relationship with. Whereas in calendar year 2021, so after I moved to Miami, where people have been meeting in person, for a long time, and it's basically the default, I made 12 new investments in calendar year 2021, and probably 3/4 of them are founders that I had never met before.
Wow. Okay. But I'm sure you're going to meet them soon.
Oh, I've already met them all. I've met back. I've met all of the, all of the ones we met this year. There's one I haven't met before, and I'll meet her soon. She's actually going to come from the Bay Area to Miami. And then last year, of the 2 investments, I've already met one of the 2 I made, during COVID.
Okay, great.
Which is a weird experience, having already wired a lot of money, millions of dollars to somebody, and then a year or 7 months later, meeting them for the first time. It felt very surreal.
Well, this is the new reality, right? We're all living in. And I think it's been, an opportunity also for founders to get access to funds that they would have not gotten access before, right? They would have had to travel to the Bay Area and get an appointment. And I think that the positive side of this is that you can actually meet more founders virtually without spending that much money and actually travel. And it's just a different way of investing. And do you think we're going to continue in a hybrid of virtual and in person going forward?
Yeah, I think that founders actually, I suspect, like the Zoom-based investing better than investors do. And founders have more actually control of the process. Right. Founders have much more leverage than investors, at least in the last 2 or 3 years. It's a founder's market for capital. So founders like the convenience. They can align investors on their schedule. They can make the dynamics of a round very competitive by timing everything, sort of consistently. That was always very difficult to arrange in practice. So if founders continue to drive the process, many of them, not all, but many will prefer Zoom-based calls. I think we switched to a hybrid model where maybe the first meeting or so is done by Zoom.
Okay.
And if there's no interest, then maybe we switch to real world sort of interactions and pitches. I personally would prefer to revert back 100% to real world interactions, but it's not going to be totally up to me. It's going to be it's going to be how the founders vote with their feet.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, great. So can we talk now about flow of capital into the ecosystem? Quite often you see hot sectors or industries, both life science and fintechs, that have been having huge inflows. Can you talk to us about how you see innovation impacting capital flows? And are the most innovative technologies and companies seeing the biggest returns?
Good question. We as investors at Founders Fund are agnostic. So we're generalists. We don't have specialization among the team, among our investment. We don't have a sector criteria. So you'll see us investing certainly across financial services, extremely large shareholders in, let's say, Stripe, as an example. We've funded a lot of interesting innovation in financial services since I've joined Founders Fund 2.5 years ago. Think of Ramp, Trade Republic in Europe, are all phenomenal companies in financial services. We fund a lot of biotech innovation as well. So you go the other way. We're innovating in space. One of my colleagues co-founded a company called Varda, which is going to conduct manufacturing in space. So we'll invest wherever we see interesting founders chasing ambitious ideas that have high impact. But typically, investors are derivative from founders' interest. So typically, we can only invest in areas of interest to founders. So if founders see success in certain verticals, they may be more likely to emulate that success than be the first person who pioneers the success. So now that Rocket Lab has gone public, that SpaceX is worth, call it like plus or minus $100 billion, a lot of founders are really interested in innovating in space. Whereas when Elon first started SpaceX, I think almost everybody thought he was crazy. And so very few founders wanted to chase after innovation in space. Now it's kind of a cool, trendy, potentially successful thing for founders to do. And that allows investors who follow the founders' interest to invest in space more actively. So that's how that's once in a while we'll incubate a company from scratch at Founders Fund, but typically, call it 95% of the time, founders are coming to us with ideas they already have, and we can only really fund the ideas that founders have and are interested in and are passionate about.
Okay, got it. So aerospace and biotech are being invested heavily as we speak, and subsequent to that, are they seeing the biggest capital flows, or are they too risky?
No, I think it's very easy to invest in these companies. It's always a question of dose of capital and the valuation associated with that, so the risk reward, and against the milestones that can be proven on lower doses of capital. You don't have to build a business completely successful at one tranche of capital. Almost nobody ever does. But you need to prove that you can achieve milestones. I funded now 2 rounds of genomic sequencing innovative company. It's extremely cutting edge science, but they were able to achieve milestones all along the way so that it felt a fairly safe investment actually for me, especially the last round of financing.
And I'm seeing some of those also going to blockchain, which is very interesting, the mix Gino.
Yeah, crypto as a sector is obviously extremely hot in quotes right now, partially because founders are interested in crypto, and so they're starting more and more companies, and the companies are growing. Almost every company in the crypto sector for the last, call it 6 to 12 months, has seen explosive growth, which makes it easier to deploy capital, makes it easier for founders to emulate the success. So that sector is obviously white hot right now.
Okay. And are you personally inclined to invest in a specific sector, or is it industry agnostic and you're just...
I'm completely agnostic. I have no interest in sectors at all. I expect founders to kind of walk in to teach me about the world. So they typically will walk in and say, you know what, I have a really interesting observation that this is broken or this can be improved and I want to solve it, and here's how I'd solve it. And if it resonates with me, then I'm really interested in giving them resources to chase their dream.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And I also read that you love to seek for anomalies in some of the... Can you tell us a little bit or give a couple of examples?
Yeah, so I think generally when you're looking for power law distributions, you're looking for things that defy the ordinary and conventional analysis. So middle of the bell curve data, KPIs, just will not create a breakthrough company. Because you basically are trying to upend an industry or upending the world, which has a lot of inertia. So you need to find things that are very unexpected. The most famous example, sort of in my history, was at PayPal. None of the top 7 or 10 markets when we launched the company were intentionally designed to penetrate eBay. It was accidental. David Sachs, at the time, was VP of strategy in the company, later VP of product and COO, noticed that 54 eBay sellers had manually typed into their eBay listings, please pay me with PayPal. And several executives actually wanted to stamp this out and said, well, wait, what's going on here? We didn't approve this. We should shut this down. And David walked into the office the next day and said, aha, I think we found our market. So he found this anomalous behavior because it was difficult. No one encouraged them to type, please pay me with PayPal. But it evinced how much friction there was in the baseline products and how much sellers really wanted something like what PayPal could provide. Then over time, we amplified that by providing convenient tools and services that would make it easy to integrate PayPal with their eBay listings and automate it.
Mm-hmm. No, amazing that when you pick up that anomaly and transform it into an opportunity and actually scale it, I think that's very powerful.
Yep. Basically, you're looking for anomalies conceptually because they mean that the current paradigm that the world's operating under are probably wrong. I mean, this famous gravity prediction about the solar, this is how we figured out that the Earth revolves, around the sun, not the other way around. Anomalous data and observation, and then it really forces you to reconceptualize what you're doing.
Of course, thinking out of the box and actually taking risk. I really think that is very important. So let's talk about valuation for a second. We're starting to see some pretty rich valuations as the industry sees more capital flow into VC and dry powder continues to rise. How do you think companies will be valued in the future? And are multiples going to continue to expand, or you think there's going to be a correction ahead?
It's hard to predict. I mean, by any historical standard, valuations are pretty high right now, certainly for early stage investors. Basically, the highest, maybe it's almost surely the highest valuations on average that we've experienced since the late 90s, since the internet bubble. That said, the public comparables to many of these companies, the valuations are actually pretty reasonable. Some are higher than others, but they're not fundamentally absurd in many cases. Mm-hmm. So there's usually some synchronization with some time lag between private company valuations and public. But right now, the private companies, you're not even valuing on a multiple basis because there is no revenue. There's certainly no EBITDA or anything like that. So you're kind of having to apply an artistic judgment on valuation anyway. So it's really disconnected. I think the laws of physics right now on valuation are kind of removed. So there's a lot of capital. There's a lot of belief and optimism, which is generally a good thing. There's a lot of confidence in the future that the future of technology will transform most industries, if not all industries. And there's examples of publicly traded companies that have done phenomenally well at massive scale. And so people can see and talk their way into a valuation that on a risk-adjusted basis feels reasonable, even on an isolated basis, like about this specific company and this specific company's progress feels crazy.
Yeah, got it. And do you see certain trends or technologies as deeply overvalued?
I think right now it's fairly universal across SaaS businesses, consumer businesses, crypto businesses. There's a fair amount of valuation, sort of increase over the last 5 years. I don't think it's like isolated or isolatable to just one vertical. There are some off the central casting niche verticals that are very complicated, where the valuation increases are not as stark.
Yeah.
But you have to have expertise in those verticals to be a why to invest prudently in those sectors.
Yeah, some of these rounds that we're seeing typically before would have been Series Bs and now are Series As. So some of that has changed, and founders are getting access to much more capital now.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that, where you typically would raise, a seed round of 1 to 3 million, and then a Series A of 4 to 8 million, and a B round of 10 to 20. All that's kind of shifted this way rather. And so we're definitely seeing Series A's that are more like 8 to 15 million, or sometimes seeds of 6 to 12 million, and commonly as opposed to rarely. Those rounds always did happen, but they're the exception, not the rule. Yeah. Becoming much more normalized.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about regulations. They're definitely a hot topic nowadays with technology. Politicians and regulators still disagree to what extent the internet should be regulated. How do you weigh the possible impact of government policies and regulations? And how do you think technology in the future is going to interact with policy?
Well, society in the United States certainly is more regulated in any possible way than ever before. Like, there's almost nothing you can do in your life that's not infused with law and regulation. So the fact that technology companies and startups are not immune from a general wave isn't surprising. So that said, I think we always look at and calibrate this very specific regulatory risk and approach of an individual company, not a macro comment, not a macro observation. So if a company is doing something that requires a change in law and regulation, that's a big problem. If they can work within the current constraints, that's much more exciting. So the part of the art is framing the value proposition, the product, the approach within the current defaults, and not having to seek a new set of defaults. I think that rarely works.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you don't think this would threaten an open and free web in the future?
Well, I do think we're seeing the end of one open. There is not one open free web. I mean, China, whether people are paying attention or not, has fundamentally, undermined that for 20x years since the beginning of the internet era. But you're now seeing the balkanization even more starkly, where Europe has their own perspective and may, have requirements or deal with things differently. China will be different. The US may have, some of its own quirks. So there's almost surely going to be multiple versions of the internet.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Totally. Okay, so considering the boom in cryptocurrencies, hot topic since their creation, as well as their adoption by Fortune 500 companies, despite the volatility they have, what are your thoughts about investing in cryptocurrency?
Well, we've been interested in cryptocurrency for a long time and have taken direct positions in crypto. We've funded companies that are directly crypto companies and things that leverage cryptocurrency or blockchain in interesting ways. So we're always looking for new ideas, new opportunities. There are a lot. Some of it is fueled by speculation, just like some of the Robinhood traction is fueled by speculation, sometimes government-funded speculation, which is a little less durable. But what we're looking for is something ideally that's permanent, that there's a durable value proposition that will resonate for a sustained period of time, like any other technology company. We build technology companies for the future of 20 years, like discounted cash flow 20 years back is how you get to some of these valuations. So we need we need a team that wants to build something for 20 plus years, and with a product and value proposition that's going to resonate with a substantial set of customers for 20 plus years. So we try not to get caught up in the ebbs and flows of the day, the week, the month, the flavor of that time frame. Just doesn't really work for our investment criteria and goals. But if someone has an approach that's differentiated, that has potential permanence and accumulating advantages, we would absolutely be excited about investing in the crypto sector.
Okay. So you don't think there's a risk in taking crypto in the balance sheet?
Well, there's definitely risk. I think a well-run treasury department can take crypto in the balance sheet as a complement to various other maneuvers. So it's like a risk reward, but it's a portfolio management approach. It's not like we're 100% of our balance sheet.
Yeah.
Literally the same.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And how do you think the currency markets are going to continue to evolve if decentralized currencies take hold?
It's unclear. Obviously the US dollar has been the central reserve currency of the world for a very long time. And there's some aspects that suggest that may be becoming more powerful, and there's some aspects that suggest it's becoming less powerful. Net, not obvious that there's a new centralized currency or that currency becomes completely decentralized either. It's really not my area of expertise. This is something my colleague and partner Peter Thiel is an expert at. Okay. I don't tend to follow, this except at a very high level.
Okay, no, understood. So one last question, and I think one you're probably getting a lot. You recently moved to Miami from the Bay Area, so welcome. I'm also in Miami. How has it been to move here? How has the experience been to work from Miami? I know Founders Fund opened an office recently here, and just tell us a little bit of how that experience has been, and what's your future vision for the office here in Miami?
Yeah, so we opened an office. So I moved to Miami about 9 months ago. I've loved it in Miami, found it an extremely well-run, interesting, diverse, cosmopolitan city with lots of opportunities for work, life, travel, everything you'd always want, from cuisine to retail, shopping, people. Blending of industries is very refreshing. I meet people who've been successful in real estate, financial services, entertainment, constantly. People are curious. There's a really interesting and refreshing culture of achievement. People want their kids to emulate successful people, not penalize them, which is really a nice contrast. It's a very safe, friendly, clean city, especially compared to the Bay Area, which is dysfunctional. So been super excited ever since I moved here. Been really happy with the ability to persuade other entrepreneurs, other investors to move here. 9 of my 12 closest friends have already moved here in just 9 months, and I'm working on some more. So we're really excited about year 2. Founders Fund signed a lease for about a 7,500 square foot office. We're still building out a real flagship office, which will hopefully open towards the end of this year. Several of my colleagues have already purchased homes here, several of my investment professional colleagues. And so we're really excited about using this as a base for investing in Miami, also the ability to invest in Latin America more successfully, potentially even work with European founders just a little bit more conveniently. Moving companies here. We funded a company in Europe that's moving here. We work with some companies in New York that are actively either moving here whole or part. Miami's becoming a destination of choice for technology companies and founders. Investors, it's easy because investors can be anywhere, but founders and companies need to be built probably in a 1 or 2 primary locations, and Miami is starting to look like a really good option for them.
No, that's great. And I've been working through Endeavor Miami with a lot of founders here for several years, and we're also very excited to see the different founders moving from different parts of the United States and more investment capital for local companies here and for Latin American companies that are also starting to move to Miami to get access to the United States market. So I think it's an excellent and very exciting time for Miami, and we're really happy to have you and Founders Fund here. So hopefully soon we can start working together and helping more companies scale and be successful.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you for joining us today and for giving us amazing insights into what's happening in the entrepreneurial ecosystem currently, and hopefully soon we'll see much more success and companies disrupting different industries and more interesting innovations for other investors to also support, right? That's where we're all here to help founders be successful.
Thank you very much.